I feel a bit of a sham in front of all you very professional research people, because I'm not a researcher. I'm also used to speaking to rather empty red benches. And I'm used to those, particularly at the end of a long day, which this isn't at the moment. This is like midday. So don't worry about that. I think Rachel will make a splendid chief whip with all these flashing lights and and of course, in the household, we've also got some rather fine wallpaper, not this rather green. And also, as far as I can see, there are no bishops around, are there? Any hidden bishops? No? No, okay. What I'm going to do is really three things. I'm going to give you a rundown on how Parliament works in about 2 minutes. I'm then going to pose a question to you all. I'm then going to shower you with lots of bits of paper which reflect, I think, how a bill goes through the House of Lords. And then we can talk about that later. So, if I can just put my question to you first, because I've been fascinated by every single presentation, and you've made me think about how this actually could apply to the situation I find myself in, where, yes, I use research, and the but I want the answer to is, how can research really, really influence legislation? How do you get in there? You know, what can you do? Because I think that the issue of research is, it's not so much that people don't know it exists, but they actually think they're right. I didn't mention Michael Gove. You know what I mean? It's a real problem that people think they have a particular ideological viewpoint, whether it's sex, whether it's education, whether it's health, whatever. They're right, and they won't budge. Just, you know, tell the research, and I can know it. So that's my question. So let me just quickly talk you through. If you know all this, just say, we know this, it's really boring, stop, and I'll go on to something else. But what happens in Parliament is that we have the Queen's Speech, now always in May. In the Queen's Speech are set out bills which will be talked about in the next Parliament. Last time there was a Queen's Speech there were 15 bills, then people added to the bills with private members' bills and emergency legislation like same-sex marriage and so on. So you start off with the Queen's Speech, and then we come to dealing with it. And we have what's called a first reading, which is where they just say, this bill's arrived, end of story. The second reading, where people speak and give their opinions about the bill and try to tease out some issues. Then starts the interesting bits, because we then have committees, well, a committee, where people put amendments, so try to change the bill or add to the bill. And then we have a report stage where the amendments get voted on seriously, and people are looking for concessions from the government on their amendments. That happens in both the Commons and the Lords. Bills usually start in the Commons, then come to the Lords. I have to say that the Commons, sometimes the bill is not finished. It's not dealt with as thoroughly as we deal with it, because the House of Lords is full of experts and full of people who want to argue, especially the lawyers. So, in the House of Lords, we have the first reading and a second reading, and people decide what they want to focus on. And what I focus on in the House of Lords was on trafficked children in the bill, kinship care issues, personal social health education, and the Children's Commission. I contributed to other discussions like about smoking in cars and so on. Those are my 4 real issues. In the Lords we have one Minister for Education and other specialist ministers, and I must not forget to mention that the people who really drive the bill are the civil servants who have to be up to speed and running with issues, and I don't know how they do it, but there are a lot of them to deal with specific issues. Our Minister in Law has had 12 civil servants dealing with this particular Children and Families Bill, which is a complex and difficult bill. We also have feeding into us the voluntary sector, who have got their researchers, who've got their experts on a particular issue, you know, Bernardo's, NSPCC, NCB, Children's Society, all bombard us with information about the particular aspect that they are concerned about, which is very helpful. I'm not being critical at all. So that's what roughly happens. And before I came today, I asked the civil servant who was in charge of this bill to say, Jenny, how long did we spend on this bill? How many amendments were there? She heaved a deep sigh and then came up with this information. I said it was a long, complicated bill, about this thick. It was. We spent, in both Houses of Parliament, 21 days in the Commons and 19 days in the Lords. That doesn't include talking between sessions of the bill. There were 502 amendments tabled in the Commons and 649 in the Lords, unheard of, I would say. And we put in after the Lords debates, a whole new part of the bill called Welfare of Children. So it was a busy, busy bill, and some of it was quite complicated. And I thought that we got through it in the Lords really with remarkable success, and I'll tell you a bit more about it in a minute. I'm going to show you what a bill actually looks like in its index. Thank you. And the next bit to come around is what a bill looks like in the explanatory notes. The explanatory notes are sometimes longer than the bill, I have to say. But anyway, I've cut these down and I'll just say a few words about each of these two things. Let me just keep these. Rachel, can I have one of those bill things now?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. All right? No, you're not.
You've got a spare room.
You can keep these documents. None of them are secret, as far as I know. So, this is what we talked about on this first one you've got here. It looks like that. These are all the topics. As you can see, there are lots and lots of topics here. From contact post-adoption, looked after children, family mediation, I'm not going to go through all this, you can keep it, look at it. Special educational needs, appeals, codes of practice, etc., etc. So a big bill with lots of topics. Okay? Then, just have a quick look at this page that looks like this. What's that terrible noise? I don't think that's this explanatory notes, just have a quick look at this. You'll see here that each topic on the bill is listed and explained. Well, sort of explained. So the adoption procedure explained, what the intention of the bill is to delay adoption procedures. If you look at Part 2 on family justice, change to improve the operation of the justice system, private family law, etc., etc., child arrangement orders, special educational needs, Part 3, and gallop. I tell you, I am galloping, because Rachel get cross otherwise. Part 3, special education needs, a huge section. Took a lot of days, a lot of hours to get through this. again, because we've got lots of experts in there. Part 4 was on childcare, about childminder agencies, chief inspectors and so on. That was quite controversial. Part 5 was the Children's Commissioner, which I spoke on. And this was really about the independence of the Children's Commission. How independent can a person who's appointed by government be? Good question, I said. I didn't get any real answers very well. And so on and so on. So these explanatory notes take you through the bill and give you the main issues. So then, we have to get down to doing work on the bill. And the work on the bill consists mainly in amendments. I've got amendments here by the first lot. Shall I just separate these off? Actually, well, these are all Baroness published lots. No, they're not. That's me. The first amendment you're getting here is one by the wonderful Baroness published lots, who used to chair the family courts. Sorry, Bishop, thank you. Who tactfully, just as any lawyer would, started off by saying, "My lords." That's how you start your speeches. I'm sorry I didn't do that tonight. She says, "My lords, I said this was a good bill, nonetheless." And then she tore it to pieces. With various amendments. And this is the amendment I selected to give you. It's cut down, but this amendment is about that very difficult issue about, in placing a child for adoption, the agency must give due consideration to the child's religious persuasion, racial origin and cultural and linguistic background. Highly contentious issue. She was brilliant at it. She did chair a pre-legislative scrutiny report on adoption. And this issue came up in that. They completely ignored it. This is what I mean about reserve. Completely ignored it. We had amendments about ethnicity. It didn't bring it. Completely ignored. The second amendment, so I'm sorry, she can be very busy here.
That's because I just looked at my back.
Is it? Oh, good. Is, what's this one? Oh, this is my amendment. Oh, yes, this one. Right. I'll be very quick about this one. I won't be, I know this one, so I don't have to have a copy. Are these folks here being included in all this?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. This is my amendment, one of my amendments about kinship care. Now, I don't know if there are any experts on kinship care in the room, or if anybody else can print it, but we've been working on this issue for about 7 years. And we've nibbled into the issue of why do people, particularly grandparents, who take on a child when the parents are dead in prison or on drugs or alcoholics, why do they not get the same benefits as somebody who fosters a child does? And they don't. They're landing with the child or children at midnight, sometimes they're called the midnight grannies, and they get little support from social services, they get little payment for doing it, yet somehow the results from this taking care of the children, the kids are more balanced, more successful academically, but there's no credit given to these wonderful people, I call them heroes, who take on the children. So my amendment was all about how do we get this better? Well, we got a few concessions, but we didn't get very many, as usual. Because, of course, it costs money. And they won't take it. Okay. Right, the last one I'm going to show you is about the education and healthcare plans. Again, it's cut down vastly. This is by Baroness Stretford, the opposition minister, my minister, exam lady here in the Lords. And it was about being able to appeal on the education and healthcare order. So this is what amendments look like, okay? Lots of them are put, all are debated, the government accepts some, doesn't accept some, and then you come to voting. You vote in the Lords, content or not content. You win some, you lose some. But what is significant about this whole process, particularly in the Lords, I think, is it's not just about voting amendments. You do tons and tons of work in the background with the voluntary sector, with the researchers, dare I say, and with the Minister and his team, or her team, to try and hammer out what the real issue here is, and can we reach a compromise. And I'm going to give you a couple of lectures here. Again, they're not secrets, they've been all in the library. This was a letter to me from the Minister about the Children's Commission, where we've been trying to hammer out a compromise. We actually didn't get one, but we tried. The amendment I put on personal social health committee was so long I couldn't possibly have copied it. And the lecture was so long I couldn't possibly copy that either. But we did get a concession on that, which I can talk about if you want to later on PSHE. Good concessions. So this was on Lord Nash is the Secretary of State, is the Minister of the Lords for the government. And this is about Children's Commission. My point was that the Children's Commission should conform to the European Convention on the Rights of the Child. And that's always a problem in England. Not Scotland or Wales. In England it's a problem because people, for some reason, the government does not want to have the rights of the child on the face of any bill. Even though I think it will make it a lot easier for them, they won't do it. So this was part of that ongoing argument. Now this was, this second lecture was to, it says, Dear Maggie and Bev. Maggie and Bev are Maggie Jones and Bev Hughes, who are our spokespeople in the Lords and the Labour benches. And this is about being employed in children's homes. I'm giving you this so you can look at what people do and how it all happens. Oh my God, I don't have time. I'm running on it. Got more of them. How have I got all of them? Is that Maggie and Bev?
This is Maggie and Bev.
Well, I'll have to give them some more. You're doing very well, Rachel. You can see that all this is couched in the most polite of terms. That's how we operate in the House of Lords. It's not on every sentence with my lords. You're not allowed to insult me because that's called speaking with asperity. That's an ancient term, speaking with asperity. But generally we are polite, and generally we do actually get things. Don't sit down yet, Rachel. So that's a kind of very quick overview of how it proceeds. You know, information, the bill, amendments, letters, meetings that try to get the thing together. And in the Lords, I talked about getting concessions through meetings and talking and amendments, and this is what we achieved. These are the concessions we got.
Yeah.
I don't know how many there are, there's quite a lot. I'll just pick on one or two, which I think might interest you.
Can I ask you, Doreen, did research make any difference in any of these concessions?
Let me try and pick on one or two and answer that question with one or two particular instances. Because I think it did at some point do that, but you'll not actually now the concessions. Right, okay.
Excuse me, we can't hear anymore. Can you speak just a bit
Yes,
louder?
sorry, I was looking down, so I'll look up now. The medical conditions one was a thing about children with long-term medical conditions being dealt with in schools, and schools having a policy. Family justice, there was one about parental involvement, interesting one. The special education needs one. Well, as you can see, there are a lot there, and we had plans for care continuing past the 25th birthday, and a lot of disabled children being included in the bill. It wasn't just special education needs in regard to mental incapacity. Children's Commissioner, well, we got some sort of progress on that, not a lot I have to say. We got a long way on young carers and their rights, which was interesting. And on child health we got a lot of support on smoking in cars, and we won that amendment quite compellingly. This is an example where research did come into it. Smoking in cars, lots of research, lots of medics coming in there and saying this is how it affects the lungs. So yes, I think in that case it did come in, but I think on other issues it probably wasn't quite so strong. But we can talk about that, later on. So this is not published. This is a Labour document, the amendments we won, but it's you can quote if you like. So we did actually, as I say, I haven't counted those concessions, but we did get on this particular bill a lot of progress, I think, and that was done by a lot of very good speakers who are very respected for their professional background, like Baroness Doreen, who could possibly argue with her? She knows everything about family justice. And there were other people like the medics on smoking issues that were very, very powerful. So that happened in the chamber, and then, as I say, outside the chamber we had a lot of these meetings. I think I must have had 5 meetings on personal social health education with ministers or civil servants, voluntary sector, meetings on most of the issues that were amendments, and at the end of that, to my surprise in some cases, like on PSHE, they did come out with some progressive amendments. And I think that the fact that the civil servant said, the government made or accepted 265 amendments. That's an awful lot of amendments in one bill to accept. So I think that what I tried to do is give you an impression of how hard a bill is to get through, and how much work that goes into it, not just in the chamber where you sit on the telly and see people speaking. It's the background work that happens. And if I tried to, I couldn't possibly have carried all the paperwork from this bill at all, because I needed 3 trucks. So I selected some examples so you get an idea of how the system works, and I'm very happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, that's wonderful. it's very, I mean, it feels like a masterclass in the process, and I kind of wish we actually had all of our students here, because it would be...
I'll come back.
We have a couple. But I think it's a fascinating insight into the process. So we've got a little bit of time, and I know that people have particular interests around particular bits of the bill, so this is your chance to ask questions of Doreen about specific things, or perhaps just to ask questions about this process and how you can influence it, and what are the dynamics. Can we do a round of applause first? Oh, right. Yeah.
Don't get those the laws either.
Okay, Des.
Well, I was going to...
Oh, sorry.
Well, I mean, I've got a question, but it's polite to let someone else, I suppose.
Well, I'll go for it.
Right. So how do you manage? That was amazing, really, really interesting, the machinations, and you're all so polite, I don't know how you do it.
No, do I.
So I just want to knock a few people out, I think, in your situation. How do you manage the tensions around... so I know that researchers are seeking to input their research. So I've got 2 points really. One on that, I can quite see that medical research is saying smoking tobacco lungs is easy to stomach. Compelling research which says it's actually not very good to cut mum out of his life, even if she has been a feckless mother, somehow isn't accepted into the adoption form, for example. So there's an issue about, is it the type of research, is it the way we tell it, or is it just the credo will out, ultimately? So that was my first point. And the second one was, I know the voluntary sector are extremely supportive and helpful and involved, and you named a few of the big players there.
Yeah.
They've got very big lobbying arms and research arms. What's there to protect colleagues like yourself from the, I guess, the particular flavour and the possible reinterpretation of research evidence that naturally some voluntary sector organisations will have? So, for example, I'm sure you would have been approached by voluntary sector organisations saying children in local authority children's homes are X% more likely to become sexually exploited, and that's, I would argue, a willful misinterpretation of the evidence around that, of course, they run children's homes. It's that sort of risk that, I guess, what are the buffers for you to protect against that?
Okay. I think on the last point, the voluntary sector are actually pretty good at interpreting research and feeding it to us who are not researchers. So that is useful. I think the acceptance of research is a problem for particularly government, but politicians as a whole. I think it's, for the government, it's partly, the first question probably, will it cost any money? Yeah? So all the stuff that we had from Lord Ramsbottom, David Ramsbottom, who used to be a Chief Inspector of Prisons, so he knows his stuff, and he's focusing on youth justice, it's obvious to everybody, well, I think it's obvious to everybody, that the youth justice system is appalling. And that kids go into an institution and come out worse very often. And then they come back into it because it's a revolving door syndrome. Now, I call that research, you know, that they come back in this revolving door. But, oh, it would cost a lot of money to have education institutions in all these places. So, somehow, we don't seem to get any further. I don't think it's just the money. I think it's also, we're genuinely scared about certain issues. I think young people are one of them. I think young criminals are a particular one. I think young sexual people are another one. And people try and find ways round getting out of doing anything about it. This is why I think research, you know, influencing politicians by research can be so difficult. One of the things that does happen is the voluntary sector often gets at the senior politicians. And it's actually often better them doing that than somebody like me from the opposite benches doing that. So we do rely on people, like researchers, voluntary secretaries, to go and see a politician and say, did you know that? And this would be good for the government, and good for your career if you just do that. That's the other thing. Good for your career if you do something about this, because it's really about becoming very brave. No, I can't. I'm not sure I answered all your questions.
So
I've got a little bit to talk about later.
the questions will all come together in the end. So
Yes, it was more when you asked the question. See, I'm absolutely convinced that if research is factual and it has no element of opinion in it, and you can't argue with it, it's got 90% more success rate than if there is. And that's in fact what we're working on within the Labour Party now, to have a lot of stuff that is factual, that cannot be argued with, rather than opinions, because I think that is terribly important. And the second thing is, if you do your research properly, and I mean, I've got an example in the organisation I used to work for, where we had the franchise for advice for immigration and asylum. And we had the caseload, we had a lot of people, and we did some research, and it was very factual, and the law was changed twice as a result of what one of my solicitors did. And that is because it was factual, it was based on practice, it was something that very pertinent for the moment, because it was happening as we discussed it. And the third thing is that quite often you can show how you can save money. For instance, when I needed money for a day centre for homeless people, I went to the Director of Social Services and I showed him that the people we looked after were not admitted to hospital as frequently as they were before. And I worked out exactly to the penny how much they cost and what money we had saved. And you know, that was half of what I needed to pay for the day centre, and I got it. You know, and all through my life. And we started, actually, I've just used your research, funny enough, because Sussex used to run an urban studies course, which was cut after 3 years, I think. And you were the hero of that, you know, we used all your stuff, you know.
Are you sure it's not the other Doreen?
Kevin Morgan and myself, we were the instigators.
Two Doreen Massey.
it might be the other one.
People doing that research.
As long as it's factual and it cannot be argued with, that is absolutely permanent. And too many people in research put an opinion or something that is not 100% kind of evidence. And the minute you do that, you're on the sliding slope. But if you stick to the facts, you usually get it through.
Can I just jump in there and ask a question that's slightly the opposite, which is about, I mean, when, back in the day where I was involved in doing sort of lobbying stuff, there's the other side of that, which is the real life stories, the case studies, which actually, in many cases, if you're talking to politicians, are much more powerful than loads and loads of factual or quantitative research, which doesn't give the result that people like. So there's also a moral case to be made, arguments about real people, real examples, or narrative type research, isn't there?
That's a good point, because I remember when Labour were in power and we were discussing kinship care, family and friends care, yet again. And with the Grandparents Plus and the Kinship Care Alliance, we brought in 20 grandparents to talk to Bill McKenzie at Easter. And he gave them sandwiches round a table, and they gave him the stories absolutely, you know, honestly, and he was very moved. And he did something. Not enough, but he did something. And I remember bringing a young man who was a carer for his 2 siblings. And he was very powerful. So that is very powerful. I think the other thing is that, what I was going to say to you, that factual research, you know, I think you mentioned the free school issue. Now, I've read the research on free schools in Sweden. Why are we going down this route?
Yeah, they say in the law.
So I think the factual, it depends on the facts. And it depends on on the ears that take in the facts.
Bella?
Yeah, I just want to kind of add a little bit to that, because within the idea of evidence-based practice, I mean, it's not without contention, the idea that of facts being without an ideological base. So I just kind of thought, you know, it's how that evidence is gathered, and that we then say they're fact. It's like there's a definitive truth it's not necessarily that easy, I think.
Yeah, but that's true. But for instance, if you say 2 women a week get killed by their partners, that is actually a statistical fact. And you cannot argue with that. And there is no kind of, no emotional content to it in that sense, it's a fact. And that's the kind of facts I'm talking about. And I think we've been far better off in having a few facts, but they are incontrovertible and they had to give in. And over that than over lots of... And I agree with you that sometimes you can change the mind and hearts of the whole board of the housing corporation by showing a few cases. But then there's the others to say, yeah, rubbish, you fell for that, right? Well, with facts you cannot say that, and that's what's different.
This is great because you're causing controversy. I like it. Great. There's going to be Des and then there's going to be Elaine.
So I absolutely I'm in partial agreement with what you're saying, but I think recording here is correct that all facts are not created equal. And I'm not even sure that the concept of facts is helpful, particularly if you look about social sciences and social care research particularly. We're a bit scant on some facts, and actually 2 women a week are killed by their partners, except some of their ex-partners are complicated because they're sort of together. And the issue is not the fact, the issue is, so what do we do about it? And I would say more powerful than fact is sums. Your point about the care home, much more useful I think, because actually prove that it saved you money, and then I might win the moral argument, except we go if we can't win the moral argument.
Elaine?
I found all the talks fascinating, but also the juxtaposition between your two, Des and Doreen. In particular, because like the work of RIP, for example, is incredibly impressive, with its focus primarily about, not just bridging, so making a quilt, let's say, between research and practice. I like that kind of metaphor. With a focus on actually making it happen in practice. And I think we could sort of see how some of that modelling of how it can work well. What I'm still stuck with, Doreen, is how does the research community get its voice and out its messages into that political and legislative process that you're talking about. And the brokers, if you like, that you were referring to seem to be, I mean, the lobby groups, the voluntary the organisations who act as a mouthpiece are brokers, if you like, but their take-up of research is also going to be so they're not the people producing it. We've still got a sense of quite a big gap there. I'm talking about, and I'll take your point, and I think I started out trying to say something about that, right at the beginning, about the space between what happens when we produce this wonderful research and actually it being taken is enormous for all sorts of reasons. But even if there is an appetite for it among in the House of Lords, with people like you there, even where there is an appetite, how we manage to reach it, to inform you and others like you, to be able to argue on our behalves is still, I'm still puzzled about how we join that circle.
And I'm going to give you the last word here.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I'd say 3 things. One is you get at individual sympathetic peers on any bench. We've got a crossbench, we've got Lib Dems, we've got the coalition, but then really Lib Dems and Conservatives, Labour and Conservative. It doesn't matter which one. Get somebody who is sympathetic, who may have a glimmering of understanding, and get them to push it as far as they possibly can. Get at individual ministers, although they may not be sympathetic, like Mango or free schools, Or, I think what we found useful, we did have a very good meeting with some researchers about the Children and Families Bill as a kind of seminar for about 15-20 peers who were interested on a particular issue.
And hold that in Westminster, not ask them to come to you.
Held it in Westminster. Hold more in Westminster, the people won't travel. So we held it more there. But I think, that's the way of doing it.
Yeah.